see everybody. There we go. I don't know if you all heard that. It said recording in progress. All right, so thank you. I am new to UCLA, but not new to Los Angeles. I was born and raised here. So I'm going to talk about my pathway to medicine. I think for many of you, it may be a very similar pathway that you all are hoping to embark on. And then I'm going to leave some time to do question and answer. And I know it's there's going to be lots of questions or many of similar questions on COVID. So we'll hopefully get to that. But I think broadly about the questions that you may have. So I always talk about my pathway to medicine, as I mentioned, because I think that it's going to be very similar to you all. And part of that journey was the importance of resilience. And you all have resilience. You wouldn't be here if you weren't resilient. The role of your mentors, and also very importantly, overcoming your fears. And I'll talk about that, and following your passions. So when I think about my journey, it always starts with my family. So these are all, not all of them, almost all of them, my aunts and uncles. This picture was taken after they came from the Southwest to Los Angeles. So this is in South Los Angeles, where they lived, and where they spent and still are the vast majority of their life growing up. And the person that for me was so influential was this person here. It was my father. So he was the third oldest, and this is him actually in Vietnam. And I always tell the story of my dad because I don't think I would be where I am today had he not instilled all of the life lessons that he had, and how I watched through adversity he overcame so much. So he was the third oldest. As I mentioned, they were in Los Angeles after they left the Southwest. We're Mexican and indigenous, and they came out here for the hope of working. He had several jobs and quit high school when he was 14 because he had to help support the family, which, as you saw, we were a large family. And just before he turned 18, he was going to join the military. And he had to get a letter of permission because he wasn't 18 yet from my grandfather, which he did. And unfortunately, he joined at the time that the Vietnam War is escalating. And so he, took an exam, and they decided, he would be a great medic, and said, we're going to offer you this position. Do you want to do medic training? And he said, sure. And that started his desire. Here's his medic bag. I still have it today. I keep it safe because this medic bag for me had a huge impact in why I thought about medicine. He went to Vietnam, was in Khe Sanh, which is probably one of the worst times to be in the Vietnam War. He came back and after doing his first tour, and they asked him to do another tour, and he said absolutely not. And so he came back to Los Angeles, and he got a job in the Valley. He moved out of South Los Angeles and moved to Van Nuys because he wanted to give, he was hoping to have a family and was thinking that would be a better place to raise a family. And so shortly thereafter, I was born, and this is me and my father. He had always wanted to go to medical school, but he was working two jobs. He was supporting me. My sister came along later, and at that point he decided he was that was not something that he was going to be able to do. And he thought, I just have to continue to provide for my family, and I'll work these two jobs. But I watched him. I always tell everybody he was, I'm the regression to the mean. He was so smart. He was someone who could just things, math came very easy to him. I mean, he was just a brilliant person. And so, as I mentioned, we have lots of mentors. In my career, I had a parent mentor, and he was that parent mentor to me. So through my experience with him, growing up and watching, the struggles that he had in the family, that his really paramount was family. And he instilled in me, and what he said to me was, education is the great equalizer. He told me that all the time. And the other great motivator was a better life. So my family, as I mentioned, they worked in the fields. That was one of the jobs that they would have. My dad and I, his second job, he worked as a cook after he came back from Vietnam. And he worked in various diners across the San Fernando Valley. And the second job he had was delivering newspapers. So I send you this picture of a newspaper because for me, I would help him as a kid growing up. I would deliver the papers with him. We would bag them, which I put that picture specifically of a plastic. That was a painful thing to do when it rained. We had to go in and bag all of the papers. And then he would load me up in his car, piles of papers, and I sat on top of them, and we'd run through at 2 o'clock in the morning, delivering papers across all of the San Fernando Valley. And that was for me, as I looked out there and we went to these very expensive, exclusive neighborhoods that I would never get in except that we were delivering newspapers. I would drive across and I would say, one day I'm going to have a chance, because I'm going to get an education and I'm going to go to college and I'll be a doctor. So I wanted to show you an example of what we're dealing with college enrollment among underrepresented in medicine. And you can see by race and ethnicity, we've made some marginal strides, but part of what we struggle with is both the intersection of, I think all of you have heard many times structural racism and what we experience, also with poverty and how the intersection of those. So when you think about this, you look at college completion by race, and you look at education and poverty. And so only 23% of the white students come from families with income below 25,000. And that's, when you look at this among those traditionally underrepresented, both how poverty impacts education and our access to higher level of education is definitely impacted by our race and our poverty. And so I came from a lower socioeconomic status. As I mentioned, I was Mexican and indigenous, and essentially my chances of being successful at education were quite low. Of getting a higher level of education, getting my bachelor's degree, it was going to be a very hard road to travel, and let alone thinking about medical school. But I was determined, as I mentioned, resilience, right? You all have resilience and perseverance. Those are your superpowers. You all have that. I had that, and I pushed forward. I ended up enrolling in Cal State University Northridge. I went there with the idea of, I won't tell you how much I paid in tuition because I looked at the options of a UC. So UCLA obviously would have been an option, but I was like, that's really a lot of money compared to Cal State. And I'm like, it shouldn't matter, right? So I went to Cal State, and my plan was I was going to get my bachelor's degree. One of the things that I struggled with in high school was math. And I present this study here because I was looking at this, and part of what I struggled with was I didn't feel like I belonged, and the teachers didn't make me feel like I belonged. Now, I didn't make that attribution that the teachers didn't make me feel didn't make me feel like I belonged there. I didn't make the attribution that the system was set up for me not to be successful. I made the attribution that it was something wrong with me. I made an internal attribution. I just am not good at math, is what I said. I must not be, suited for, calculus, and how am I going to do this? And I struggled. And I found this article because I thought it really brings out the point of, what we see in math courses. There is so much bias and stereotyping of students of color in the classroom that before we even think about our college and STEM courses, we are already being shaped by the system and the education that marginalizes us and makes us feel that it's our problem. And so I fell into that trap. I believed it was my problem. And so I had to come up with, as I mentioned, I wanted to go to medical school from the time that I was a kid. I shared that dream that my father had that he never reached that. I was going to be the one to do it. But once I got into algebra in high school, I was made to feel that it was my problem that I just wasn't good at math. And so I thought, what am I going to do? I'm still going to go to college. And so I thought, well, what other options do I have? So I ended up thinking about psychology. I thought, I'm helping people, it's intellectually stimulating. What I didn't realize is there are statistics and there's math, right? So I thought, I'll help people, I'll be intellectually stimulated. It's psychology integrates the science and treatment of complex human problems. I thought this is a great field. It is intellectually stimulating. You have the Milgram experiment, the Stanford prison experiment, fundamental attribution error. That's the in-group, out-group concept, stereotype threats. Hopefully you all have heard of these things, implicit bias, all the stuff that has impacted how we get our education and how we get access, and that has been part of a system that has prevented us from being successful. And I mean us, I mean those of color, getting access to education and access to higher level education. I was like, I'm going to study this and I'm going to make inroads and discover things and talk about this from my perspective. And then there was that whole problem about math, lots of statistics. You all probably have seen this. We think about, normalization, standard deviations, the mean, the bell-shaped curve. I thought, math? Oh my God, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get through it? Well, I did get through it. I did graduate. This is at my graduation at Cal State Northridge with my father, getting my bachelor's degree. And my father was a very proud man. And the moment he dropped me off ahead of time to get prepared for the graduation, he said, okay, I'm gonna drop you off early. And he had a tear in his eye and he said, I'm so proud of you, because this was something that nobody in my family had done. We were of the group that if you graduated high school, that was a big deal. But for me to have gone to college and graduated college, for him, it was an option that he just never thought possible. So I graduated. And what I will tell you in this moment, when I was a sophomore, my father had developed a brain tumor. And so throughout my college, I spent time caring for him, taking him to treatments, being there when he had surgery. I did all of that. Again, resilience, right? We all have resilience. That's our superpower. I kept my eye on the prize. I'm going to get through. They're not going to let me not get through college. I'm going to do it. And so for him, it was a very powerful thing, knowing that he was sick, that even through that, we were able to, as a family, get through, and I was going to get my bachelor's. Then I decided to stay on and do my master's degree. So I went to do a general experimental psychology, which is lots of statistics, lots of statistics, research methodology, and then my focus, which was social psychology. So as I mentioned, your career is going to have many mentors. So my colleague mentor was somebody I met in graduate school. And you all have colleague mentors. And if you don't have them, they're there. You just didn't realize it. They're the ones that challenge you, they motivate you, they help you, they often advise you. So I had a colleague mentor, and he propped me up when I needed to be propped up. He motivated me, he challenged me, we studied, we took every class together. He and I always would fight for who got the highest score. It was a friendly competition. And in the end, we both succeeded. At that point, my dream job was going to be this tenure track academic position. I was going to get a PhD in psychology. Of course, my father at the time was like, really? Like, what does that mean? So he didn't quite understand that. And he thought, okay, I don't know, this seems like, maybe you should just, not go to more school. Because that, again, outside what we experienced in our life. And for him, he was just worried, like, what if you can't do this? When I looked at the tenure track academic positions, I realized only 24% of all academic positions were tenure track. And so I, coming from a family with lower socioeconomic status and struggled financially, was thinking, I can't do all of this work and then not have a job. And my colleague mentor said to me, as we had many long conversations about this, and he said, well, what have you always wanted to do? I said, well, I always wanted to be a doctor. And he said, well, then you should do that. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I can't. I had lots of reasons. I got to this crossroads. I thought, really, like, just saying those words out loud, go to medical school and being a doctor. I had at this point only interfaced with physicians for my dad's care, the neurosurgeon, the oncologist, and I thought, I can't be those people. I don't look like them. They didn't come from my same background. They're white men. That's not me. I can't. They did not struggle. I had, again, lots of internal attributions. They're smarter than me. They had more resources. I can't do this. And I went through my list of reasons not to become a doctor. I'm bad at math. I'm too old. At that point, I was 23, which I kind of chuckle right now. And I don't know if I'm smart enough. And then when you look at the odds, so this data is from 2018, the number of full-time medical school faculty by race and ethnicity. This is who, if you went to any academic medical school and looked around, this is who you saw. You saw a lot of white folks and not a lot of people that looked like me. And I thought, there's no way that I could do that. Because clearly, if we could, there'd be more of us, right? And that's, again, the internal attribution. Not that there were other issues out there, not that we were set up from the beginning to not succeed. I made it my issue. I looked at the courses, again, perseverance and resilience, and my colleague mentor encouraging me. I thought, okay, there's a lot. We've got, physics with lab, general chemistry with lab, organic chemistry with lab, calculus. What was I thinking? More math. Oh my God, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? I did it. And then I got to the point where I said, oh boy, there's the MCAT. So the MCAT is another set where you think, oh, this is another roadblock, standardized tests. I hate standardized tests. I never do well on these. So what did I do? I took a board prep course and I thought, how am I going to afford this? I realized that everybody else that had resources took board prep courses, but I couldn't afford that. So I went and called all of the board prep courses, and there is this, they don't publicize it, but they do offer tuition assistance. So you can apply and get a reduced rate. So I did that. I left nothing to chance. I treated it like a job. 8 hours a day. I thought, I'm only going to get one shot. I made myself like, I've only got one shot to do this. I'm going to do this. So I took my MCAT. And meanwhile, sort of through this process, my father was getting sicker. But again, I took care of him, took the MCAT. I was like unilaterally focused on this. And then I started doing interviews. I went across the country, literally flying everywhere. Until this time, I had never really traveled outside of California. And for me to get on a plane, which planes made me very nervous because that was not what, I'd not really been on planes. So I got very nervous. I said, I've got to do this. I went all over the place. And it was really eye-opening. I got to see a lot of different places, experience interview all over. And in the end, I had several choices, and I ended up going to Yale School of Medicine. And that decision was a tough decision because, as I mentioned, my father had a brain tumor, and he had been reoperated now twice. And sort of the decision of when I was getting my master's and finishing my thesis, I was taking care of him as he was on home hospice. So the last conversation I had with my dad was, I told him, I said, I'm gonna go to Yale. And he was concerned because, it was very far away. I've never left California. What he did tell me was, I had gotten into UCLA, and he said, I think you need to go to UCLA. And I said, why UCLA? He said, it's the best medical school in the country, in the world. I said, really? I mean, better than Yale? And he said, oh yeah, Yale's not good. Harvard's not good. I was like, what about UCSF? He said, UCSF is not good. And I said, oh, I get it. The closer it is to you, the better med school it is. I said, well, I think I'm going to go to Yale. I want to see something different. I want to experience something different. So the last conversation that we had before he passed away was, he said, I'm really proud of you, and I want you to finish what you started. So 4 weeks later, after he passed away, I went to my white coat ceremony, and David Kessler, who's recently been in the news again, he was the dean. He became the dean of the medical school at my year that I started at Yale, and there he is giving me my white coat. And I had hoped that my father would have been there in person for the white coat, but I knew he was there in spirit. So I went through and thought, how is my general experimental psychology degree going to have anything to do with medicine? It did, because I was very good at statistics. I did a Yale Cancer Center summer fellowship, and I worked with a neurosurgeon who he did work in brain tumor, and I was putting together a database and analyzing the data. Interestingly, over that summer when I worked with him, he said, you should be a neurosurgeon. You have a neurosurgeon personality. And in that moment, I was sort of struck and thought, I never would have thought, if you told me 10 years earlier, that a neurosurgeon that was the head of the department at Yale School of Medicine would think I could be a neurosurgeon. I didn't want to become a neurosurgeon, but I didn't tell him that. I did a fellowship in academic medicine at Harvard. We published a paper in my 6 weeks of fellowship, and I was on the road to women's health. I graduated. I brought my dad's brother, my Uncle Cruz, and his wife, Aunt Sherry, to the East Coast for my graduation. This is my graduation. There's David Kessler again, now giving me my diploma. And they had never been again on the East Coast, and it was so exciting for them. My uncle, I gave him a tour of the medical school, and he said to me, I'm so proud of you, because in one generation, the Luceros went from picking vegetables and fruit in the fields to going to Yale School of Medicine. And so my family was very proud. Of course, it was, an accomplishment for not just me, but for my family. I then decided to head back. I had had enough of the cold, and I went to UCSF, and I was a faculty there up until July. On my road to being a faculty there, I did my OBGYN residency. The chief resident told me when I started as an intern, the days are long, the months and years are short. And it is, it went by quickly. This was my schedule. I said, doing residency, and I tell the med students this all the time, it is like running a marathon, a mental and physical marathon. You are physically being challenged with the schedules. You are emotionally being challenged with the patient care, really helping the patients. You see a lot of things. It's intense. And, and you're also learning and reading and about your specialty. I was in practice for 2 years and then went back and did anesthesia. And at UCSF, I had done 2 residencies, both in obstetrics and gynecology and anesthesia, and 2 fellowships, an obstetric anesthesia fellowship and an NIH research fellowship. And then I stayed on, as I mentioned, as a faculty. I was an obstetric anesthesia faculty, a program director for the obstetric anesthesia fellowship. I was the vice chair of diversity, equity, inclusion, and I did work with medical school admissions and was a part of the executive committee there and helped develop a pipeline program for women's health and anesthesia. And then I decided to come back home. And as my dad said, to come back to the best medical school in the country. So I joined the David Geffen School of Medicine as the Associate Dean of Admissions, where I run the admissions office, the financial aid office, pipeline and outreach, and I'm the Vice Chair of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for anesthesia and do obstetric anesthesia clinically. I have to say, I have the most perfect job. And I would say I wouldn't have been able to do it, as I mentioned, without all of my mentors. I talked about my parent mentor, my colleague mentor. I wouldn't have been able to do it without my life partner mentor, who's my husband for many, many years. We met in high school. So he's been on this journey with me and had to endure all of the training. There he is. And without my career mentors, I've listed them all here, from high school all the way to my current. And I do that because I want you to realize that you're going to have so many different mentors, and I call on them at different times. I'll reach out. I just emailed Nancy Angoff, who is now retiring. She was the Dean of Students at Yale. David Wofsy was the retired now admissions dean at UCSF, and I reach out to him and ask him. You never stop using and calling on your mentors, and they all do different things and have helped me guide me through all different parts of my career. And now I'm at the best medical school in the world. So your pathway is really about your resilience, which you all have, conquering your fears, finding mentors, listening to your mentors, and really at the end of the day, you have to do what you're passionate about. So with that, I'm going to end here and have a chance to do questions. So if you want to, I'll stop sharing so I can see. And there we are. I'm going to put on gallery view. Okay. All right. So I'm not sure how you want to do this. You could either do raise hand, do chat. I'm happy to have conversations. So however you want to work it, you tell me. I'm going to end this show here so I can, there we go. Okay.
Hi, Dr. Lucero, could I ask a question?
Yes, yeah, please.
So, how did you first get involved with UCLA Geffen? Like, was it a position that you applied for, or did you email them and requested to if you could participate in in their office, or
Oh
how did
yeah.
that work out?
How did that work for me? It was my mentors actually. So whenever there's for a leadership position like that, they usually put out a call, and it's admissions deans. They're everybody sort of knows each other, especially at the UCs. So I had I had been one of the individuals that I worked with on DEI had saw the call for an admissions dean, position, and then I went to David Wofsy and said, "What do you think about this?" And um, he had already encouraged me to look at admissions deans positions before the David Geffen. So I personally would have not thought a dean, like, what is that? Like, oh no, I'm not at that level. But it was David who actually said to me, like, of course you could be a dean of admission. You love it. You're great at it, And so he encouraged me. And then he actually reached out to David Geffen and there's a whole recruitment group and said, I have somebody that I'd like to nominate for this position. And, then they reached out to me and said, we'd like you to apply. So that's how it works.
Thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions? Let me look at the chat here. We have, oh, there we go. You can also put them in the chat or jump offline and jump off mute and ask away.
I have one more quick question. How do you
Yeah.
balance your time between being a physician and then being a dean?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's part of, it is not something that you inherently gain. It's a skill you gain, and part of it you gain, you're already gaining it as a student, right? You're balancing, working. So when I've worked since I was 12. So basically I was always sort of balancing that, right? So when you're in college, you're also working. Many of us are working, and I would have to sort of figure out, okay, how do I balance? I got to get this done with I got an exam to study for, I've got this essay to write, and then I've got to go to my job. And so you kind of learn those things of how to kind of balance that system. And then as time goes on, the things get more and more gets put on your plate, but you've already developed skills. So when you're a resident, again, it's, as I said, it's like running a marathon. How do I balance? Like I've got to learn this, all this work that, the understanding the concepts of anesthesia or understanding the concepts of obstetrics. I've got to go and take care of the patients. I have to follow up on my patients' labs. And then, I have research projects that I want to do. And so as a resident, you kind of learn to get really good at kind of maximizing the time that you have, because you're also then sleep deprived because you're taking call and stuff. So as things, and then as a faculty member, somebody told me once, it's like you're juggling and you've got it's like 3 different balls in the air. So you learn kind of, everybody has their way of what works for them. Some people are really good at the lists. Some people are good at sort of, they kind of just know there's like, okay, I've got this thing, and they're thinking about stuff. I tend to, have, there's like these sort of list things in my head, and I know I've got to do this thing, and I wake up each day and I'm like, okay, this, I got to do that. And then yesterday I was clinical, and I was doing the OB anesthesia work. And so if there was a time where, I was doing a case and then nobody needed an epidural, then I go onto my email. Okay, let me get this. I know I've got to go through this stuff, check this, go look up this stuff. So you kind of figure out, each time you have moments. It's all about sort of balancing it. And then you have to have the days where you're like, you know what? I see that email. I'm not going to respond to it because it's a Saturday and I need a mental break. And so I do that. I also like to do things. I like to be active. So, I run to clear my mind. I will, I got into later in life skiing because I never skied before. So when I think it was in my mid 30s when I was a resident in OB, they took us out to the ski trip and they paid for it. And that was, I got bit with the bug then. I loved it. I don't advise getting into that sport if you want to save money because it's very expensive. So, but it's so much fun. So, so I do that, and when I go away, it's a great like family time. We go and I took lessons. I started getting, I was like, oh, I'm gonna try to get good at this. So it's really you just have to have that balance of kind of when you're on, you're on. I do work a lot, but as I mentioned, I love I really love what I do. And that's what this is all about, finding something that you're passionate about, that you love doing. There is no perfect job. So there's things I don't like about my job, but they're small. Like overall, every day, I'm like, I cannot believe that I get to do this. When I go into do my clinical work, the vast majority of my days, I'm like, I can't believe they pay me to do this. This is so amazing. There are definitely those days where I'm like, they don't pay me enough to do this, but those are few and far between. But I love it. I love it. It's really, when I get to interface with the patient and work with the patient when they're having surgery, when they're in pain and they want to labor epidural, and I go in there and I'm like, I know that I can help them, and I just connect with them. And it's just, there's something really so wonderful about that. When there's a patient that has an obstetric hemorrhage and I get in there and we do the lines and, resuscitate them, like I feel like I've done something good. And then I feel like I've given back. When I go out and give a talk and talk about the health disparities in obstetrics and what's happening with our Black and Indigenous women in obstetrics, I'm educating people on what we need to do differently as a healthcare delivery system and healthcare providers to improve that. I feel like I'm doing something. So every step of the way, like I enjoy it because I know that it's not work to me, because I'm giving back. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you again.
Mhm. Other questions about the process? If you want, you can put them in chat too. I'm one of those people that like still I'm like an introvert. I know that sounds crazy, but like I don't like to ask questions. So you can feel free to put them in chat as well. I think I'll just start throwing out some things that people commonly ask, which is, what's a good application for med school? How do we think about it? I would say I will tell you how I view the application process and kind of when you're thinking about medicine. You all, if you're deciding on a career in medicine and you want to be a physician, there is a reason why you want to do that. You ask yourself that question. And, for me, it was a lot of watching and seeing what the various health disparities that I saw within my family and my community, and I putting that together with my social psychology background. I was like, I want to be able to do something that is going to make a difference in just even care. Like I didn't have any big ideas of like I'm going to be a admissions dean. Like when I first started, it was I just want to go and take care of my community. Like that was important to me. And so whatever that is for you, whatever is driving you, think about that. And then, what you think about the application is it's your talking about your journey and what you're doing to reach that end. We talk about at DGSOM, we talk about being an outstanding physician and so we're going to train all of our medical students to be outstanding physicians. But at this institution, they're going to do more and do other things, whether it's going to be working in the community, whether it's going to be, leading a policy on changing things to make, healthcare more equitable, whether it's going to be, doing bench research or doing social research, social justice research, or going and caring for, communities in underserved areas. Whatever that is, that's their and. So you all have that and, there's being a doctor and part of what is motivating you is your and so you need to think about what am I going to do to start. The process starts now, right? So it's not about what do I need to do to get into medicine, it's what do I need to do for my and I'm going to start that now. And yes, there's things that I have to do like the MCAT, and I have to do well on my courses, but your extracurriculars, your community service, if you're doing research, like that all is your and you don't think about it like this is what I need for the med school application. I'm thinking about this because this is my and that's going to start and continue when you're in medical school and undergraduate medical education. That's the medical school. When you go into your graduate medical education, your residency, you're going to continue to build on those skills that you started right now when you thought about what your and is. Now they may change, right? I started medical school thinking about, I'm going to be a family practitioner, I'm going to be an internist, I'll do primary care. My and changed to some extent. The intrinsic part of my and never changed. Health disparities, how I practiced that and how I delivered it was a little different. I do obstetric anesthesia. I focus on health disparities within women's health. I one of the things that I struggled with is, understanding what the process was, being, a first generation, not having people to support me and say, this is what you need to do, not having access to, those individuals who were physicians. So what did I do? I said, okay, that's what I need to do. And so as I moved along, I started developing pipeline programs. We have to, think about, what can I do to like make the next generation know that they can do this, and it has nothing to do with something we're not able to do. It's the system set up, and we can change the system. So I'm here changing the system, right? So that's my and never changed kind of how I was practicing. I'm not being an internist, I'm not doing family medicine, but I am still taking care of the patient populations that I wanted to take care of and doing the work that I want to do. So you're not, the intrinsic, what it is motivating you is going to continue. And that's what your application process is about, is not, this is my journey. And this is one part of my journey, and I'm going to continue on that journey. And you will continue the rest of your life. I'm learning skills in what I do now. You're never done learning. So that's the beauty, and that's what's so exciting about it, right? So my father was right. Education is a great equalizer. It doesn't come easy though, and we have to continue to be resilient and perseverant and push the boundaries and call out things and question and say, this is not, I'm not, doing this because I can't do it. It's because the system has to change so that I can do it, right? So and there's so many people that are working on that. So I think when you think about kind of why medicine for you all, think about your and then start to do that. Any other questions, things that come up? I know there's always questions about COVID and how do we do the things that we need to do for the application for COVID. That's another very popular thing. I'm going to talk about that really quickly, and then I'm going to call on Sierra, who has her hand up. For COVID, again, we all understand that there are certain things like you didn't have access maybe to shadowing and stuff. So we do a holistic review for admissions, and I think most admissions do that. They sort of look at, and what does the holistic review mean? It basically says, the metrics that everybody gets nervous about, the GPA, the MCAT, the thing that I was like freaking out about, right? As a pre-med, that's only one portion. It's a tiny, tiny portion of who you are as a person. There is the environment that you grew up in, the extraneous things that were happening at the time of that, right? So COVID, what was happening, in this country these last 2 years, it'll be like 2 years, so what were we doing? How were you living in this environment? And what are the experiences that you have? What is your lived experience? That's all the holistic review. So COVID is part of the holistic review, and that we know it's a global pandemic. It has affected groups differently. It has highlighted what's already been there with health disparities, and it's made it worse, right? So that we understand that people have not been able to have access to like the shadowing opportunities. They've had research opportunities that have been stopped. Like, we all get that. And so when we look at the application, we know that okay, they were going to do this research, they were going to do this shadowing, they couldn't. Your part of it is to like, okay, what's my and? How can I can't do this, but I might be able to do something else, and figuring out that, but we know that you're not going to have the same, opportunities because of the pandemic. So if you were working in a lab and then there was a chunk of time that you weren't able to do things, we know that. I always say, put that in your application. I was planning to do this and this and this, but COVID happened. So I did, what I could do and this instead, or, we get it. We're not saying, oh, they didn't have this much time in shadowing and we're not gonna count that. Figure out different ways that you can be involved with your community. May not be like directly related to medicine, but it's like working with your community. One thing is they were going out and doing what you can do, volunteering with COVID vaccine delivery, and those are things that are exactly what, you're doing for your aunt, right? Taking care of in your community. Sierra, go ahead and you had your question.
Hi, my name is Sierra Butto. I'm from Pierce College. I'm a sophomore. I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming to talk to us, hearing your story and hearing you talk about the different things that you have been through and about obstetrics and gynecology. That's really hits my spot because I'm seeking for this position. I'm trying to go into obstetrics and gynecology, and hearing you talk about diversity and inclusion and how you link it and how you want to help in doing health disparities is so amazing to me, because that's one of the things I really, really want to do. And so my question is, what I want to hear more about your pipeline that you said that you mentioned earlier. I just wanted to know more about it and what drove you and inspired you to do that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about the pipeline program. And I think we have Jam even on the line too, that if she's still on, I'll have her put in the links for the pipeline program. So we have a couple different ones. There's actually three big ones that we do each year. One is SHPEP, which is it's a larger through AAMC and Robert Wood Johnson's. They basically have different sites, and we're one of the sites. Dr. Braddock is the PI at our site, and it's a summer program that really it's three different groups: nursing, dentistry, and medicine. But they have coursework that we do, and we're doing something this year, which is partnering you with a longitudinal mentor, and that's the person, and that has to do with that'll get to the question, part of the question about why pipeline for me, and why I'm involved in that. So that program, also we have the prep program. So the SHP program is for freshman, sophomore, and then the prep program is junior, senior in college. So the prep program, very similar. But it's sort of tailored to like you're getting closer to the application process, and so MCAT prep and things like that. And so the programs are every year, and you can actually go on to our our website at DGOSOM and just look at pipeline and outreach, and you'll see those programs. They're structured with curriculum. Normally, when it's not pandemic time, you're there on the campus and it's great. You get to it's more in person. These are being done virtually now. We did it last year virtually, and just we weren't sure what was happening this year with the pandemic and vaccinations, so we decided to do it again this year, virtual. I think the most important things about them is that you build a community. And for me, the pipeline part is getting to connect with physicians who will be your mentors. And so when I was at Cal State Northridge, it was so hard to find anybody that knew anything about like pre-health and medicine. There's a lot of people who tell you their ideas, but not a lot of people that have really, I asked everybody. I asked all my pre-med people that were teachers, that were like instructors, telling me, oh yeah, we had a couple of students. Oh, everybody was like, you talk to the students. It's like it was like the, what is it, Student Doctor Network. It was like before Student Doctor Network, it was like the word of mouth thing, right? So there was a lot of misinformation and a lot of, you have to do this. No, you have to do this. Oh, if you don't do this, then you're not going to get. So there was a lot of that. And I would try to read stuff in books. I would go to bookstores back when there were bookstores, looking at all this stuff, trying to understand, looking at, okay, what is the score I have to get? And at the end of that, I really felt like I didn't have anybody to talk to that was an actual physician that like went through it. And I realized how disparate that was because of where I grew up and the community that I was part of. I didn't have any family, any friends. Like I never interacted like socially with a physician ever. Like they were like up here in my mind. Like I was like, no, I was afraid to talk to them. I did not want, that was a promise I made to myself when I started med school. I was like, I am not going to let others like me feel that way. And so I went and said, okay, whatever I can do. When I started, and when I was finishing residency in OB, I was like, where can I go to talk about, I'll talk about my experience. And then I started as anesthesia. I was asked to be part of, first start on the admissions, like doing interviews. And I was like, absolutely. Like, I think this is so important. Like, what's this process? And then I started getting involved in, there was a pipeline program that was starting, and they asked me to give a talk on my journey, which is kind of similar to what I just gave you. And so many students were like, oh my gosh, this is just like me. And I thought, okay, if they know that I did it and there's nothing special about me, nothing. I am just a regular person that is perseverant and resilient, like you all are. There's nothing different about me. I want them to know that if I could do it, they could do it. And so I started to do more in the pipelines and start to develop and get more. I wanted the students to start to see more of experience of not just primary care, but anesthesia, the OB. And so that was sort of where we got involved in the pipeline. And then advising students, I continued to mentor them longitudinally. And that was one of the most important things, was the longitudinal mentorship, which is why we're starting to do that here with our 2 pipeline programs, because there are points where, you just need to like connect and say, okay, am I thinking about this? Can I, what do I need to do? Who do I need to talk to about this? How should I prep for the MCAT? Or this is my score on the MCAT. Should I retake it? Those are like all those questions that as someone who's a first generation, you're not able to get that information by talking to, Uncle Larry or whatever, right? Like all these other people, I realized when I went to med school, I was like, oh, they're like many generations of like physicians, that's it. And again, I had realized that has nothing to do with anything special about them. They just had access. They had the people telling them they could do it. So I was like, we need to have people telling all that you can do it. there's that, so that's sort of how I started to be involved. And I will tell you, you know, the best days of my career have been when I get that phone call and that email from or text. Usually, my mentees text me and say I got into med school. That's like the best day. I was like, yes. So it's exciting to see that. And so we, you know, the pipeline programs I think are really critical. I think there was some questions about letters of recommendation, tips on that. I'm going to give you sort of the idea of kind of what we think about for letters of recommendation. It's really important when you're thinking about putting together your application. There are things that we're going to see, the grades, you know, all the classes you took, the MCAT. You're going to write your personal statement. Spend time on that. Really spend time on that. Some people value it. Some people are like, eh. It's your moment to tell to tell your story, why medicine, and your journey, right? So if I'm looking at your application and I'm seeing, I can see all the nitty gritty, I'm gonna have questions. Okay, so why, so why medicine? How you're gonna connect the dots on that personal statement of why this is important to you. And then the letters of recommendation are going to be, you want them from people who've had the most experience with you, that have interacted with you, that can talk about who you are as a person. And those are very important. And so I think from that perspective, you wanna really have a sense of, you know, who can speak to me about me as a person, because that's what we're looking for. If you've done a year in a lab, you want to get a letter of recommendation from the people that have worked with you in the lab. Try not to search for like, oh, I've got this, like, you know, working in this lab of this, like, you know, person who's won all these like incredible awards or whatever, and they're the PI of that lab, but they've like talked to you once, right? They're not going to write a letter of recommendation. You know, the letter of recommendation is going to come from the lab and it's their name on the lab, but you want like their postdoc maybe that you've worked with or whatnot, you know, so that postdoc is going to work with the PI and say, okay, I'm drafting together this, but you want the message to be somebody who knows you, right? Sometimes, you know, if you're working in a clinic and you've worked with medical assistants, they may not know how to write the letter as well, but, you know, I would ask the person that runs the clinic, you know, I'd like a letter of recommendation, and could you, you know, could we talk to the medical assistant about it too? And they can get, you know, so people put together, you know, a group of like what it is to work with this person. If you volunteered, you know, at particular places, like you know, get a letter, you know, that's kind of what you want to do. So, so tips during COVID for the letters of recommendation, obviously, again, you know, people that have the most time with you. I don't, you know, you can get a letter from maybe your organic chemistry teacher, but like they've had one class with you, unless you've done a lot of work with them or were like a TA or something like that. Like, it's not as meaningful, because the letters are talking about you as a person and how you interact with the team, how you interact with other people, your interpersonal skills. And so people like that. They want to see that from the admissions point of view. I have to run to another meeting. So, and I've gone over a bit, and I apologies that I have to jump off here, but yeah.
Oh, could we have your contact information? Is it
Yeah.
Is it
Here,
cool
let
we
me
can
give you
send
that.
you emails?
Yeah. Let me just send that. Let's see. I see here. I'm putting it in the chat. Okay. There you go. All right. I'm going to jump off because one of my mentors that I put up there, Dr. Braddock, I have to meet with him, so I can't be late. All right, I'll see you all. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you all. I wish you good luck. Send me emails if you have questions. Take a look at the pipeline programs, and you all are amazing and are going to, I'm excited to look to the future to see all the great things that you've been doing. All right, take care.
Thank you for your time.